Hi everyone, hope everyone's having a great Thursday so far. My name is Sarah Fairclough and I'm the Business Administrator for our Platform Solutions team here at SmartSimple. Today, Rachel is going to be talking to you about automating your communication. And before we get into the webinar, we love to hear your questions, so feel free to post throughout. Rachel just won't be answering them until the end of the webinar. And a recording of the webinar will be posted and sent out to you all within a week. And now I'm going to pass over to Rachel.
Hi, everybody. I hope you are having a fantastic day. Even though every day seems to kind of be exactly the same, hopefully this will be a little bit different for you. I'm Rachel Sloat, and as Sarah said, I'm a Platform Solution Manager at SmartSimple. And today's webinar that we're going to be going through is going to be about automating some of your communication in the system. And in particular, we're going to be going over email templates, the email broadcast tool, and just doing somewhat of a general overview of the ways that we can automate the emails in the system and the different areas where they can be accessed, because there are obviously a number of different ways to contact your users at different points in time. And so we'll just kind of go over those options. What is the issue? So obviously communicating with the stakeholders that you have for your organization can be time consuming. It can also be something that is incredibly repetitive, especially if it's the type of communication that goes out on a regular basis, maybe like, a newsletter, or it's one that needs to go out at a particular point in time in a process. Like, for example, an award letter, that's something that's always going to be pretty standardized for a particular moment in time during your business process. So some of the contacting scenarios might be, we want to speed up the way we contact a group of users, but also make sure that the content of the email is personalized to each person to a certain degree. You want to email large batches of recipients in that example, like I mentioned earlier, maybe like a news broadcast or something like that. You want to do monthly newsletters as an example. Or you just want to email users ad hoc from the system, but you want to make sure that you're keeping track of what's being sent and maybe use templates so that you can speed up that ad hoc communication at the same time. So in the system, we have a number of different tools and ways that we can set this up. So first of all, we have our workflow emails. So these would basically be process-driven communications that are sent out from the system. So at a particular status, like awarded status, for example, you know that every single user whose grant gets awarded, they're going to need to have an award letter. So instead of over and over again, picking the people that have each been awarded, writing and drafting the email, attaching the PDF of their award letter, we can basically set up this process so that it's automated at that particular status. The email templates obviously play a part in that. You don't have to use a template just in a workflow email. You could use a template for an ad hoc email, or even use templates as part of the email broadcast. The thing about the email templates is that you can use what we call variables in the email, so that even though I send an email to Sarah and I send an email to, Joe Smith, I can put, like little pieces of reference code into that template so that it knows that when Sarah gets her email, it's going to say, "Hi, Sarah, you get X number of dollars. Congratulations, signed." And then like maybe a variable for the signature. So that means you can still personalize your emails, but really speed up the way that you're contacting everybody and not having to like go individually and edit each person's email. And then of course the broadcast. So that would be, where you want to as I've said, mass message recipients. So it might not be something related to your particular business process. You might just want to choose a particular role in the system, like maybe send a broadcast to all reviewers in the entire system, or broadcast, every single user in the system with some kind of a, templated message. But the thing about the email broadcasts, of course, is going to be some of the tracking features that we can do with that tool. So we can do a count of how many people actually opened those emails. We can also include tracking links. So if in your email broadcast newsletter, you want to include a link directly back to your website or to, I don't know, some other, like maybe a survey, if you were using an external survey tool or things like that, you can also track that particular entity as well. So how many times people open the email and how many times that particular link. So again, these are kind of things that I've already just touched on about the ways that, automating your communication and taking into account the emails and the templates and things can really improve the way your business process functions and the way you can be more efficient with everything that you do. So with that, I'm going to exit out of this PowerPoint. And I'm going to go into the system here. So let me. Okay. So here we are. This is one of our example demo systems. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to go into the main menu. And I am firstly going to talk about this communication tab. So this is where we can kind of see some of the different options in terms of the communications in the system. We'll go into some other areas as well, but I thought that I would start here. So firstly, in the email area, I'm going to jump straight to templates. And that's where we can go ahead and look at some of just the basic email templates that are in the system. So we have a couple examples that are set up here. I'm going to go into this applicant expiry notification, and we can choose, first of all, two options. So we have general email templates and email signature. So we have the ability to create an automatic signature that's going to go at the end of every single email. And of course, this is just going to give us the options to set up our lovely little template. And the categories that you're able to define will help permission and restrict where this email template can be used in the system. So this is which entity this template is going to be useful for. So this one is just general, which means depending on whether I am accessing it from, a user profile, or if I'm doing it from the submission manager menu or things like that, I'm going to be able to access this. And I can also attach roles. So that's going to basically determine who is allowed to use this particular email template. And that could be used in conjunction, of course, with the private public setting, because maybe it's an email template that's just for me. And maybe you could also do something like define a default attachment. Like if this was going to be perhaps a template for reviewers, maybe you have a standardized set of reviewer guidelines that every single one of your reviewers is going to use. And here in the email, you're going to notice some variables. And these are what I was referring to earlier about the tools in which we have to be able to pull particular values that are going to pertain to individual users. So when Sarah receives her email, it's going to use her first name and last name. And if Joe gets it, it's going to say, "Dear, Joe Smith." And that way, we're able to have one unified template, but we know that some of the content is going to be specific to each of the users. If I go back here, I think it's the LOI template. Yes, so this template, it's a little bit longer, of course, but this one you can see has been categorized to be a UTA level 1 template, which means the only place that I am going to be able to use this email template is in the level 1. So if I were to go, for example, here into my people options and click on Nicole, you can see that her email address is underlined, because what I can do here is actually open the message center, which can allow me to do like a one-off communication directly to Nicole. And obviously here we have the templates available, except, excuse me, for that one that was specified to be a UTA template. So it's not one that's going to be an option here because of the permissions that are available in the system. So that's one of the places that we can go to look up just general email templates. But we do have recently, from our upgrade, in the global settings under the communications tab, we have another place where we can set up email templates. And it's not just general email templates, but we're actually going to be able to see all of the templates that are contained within the system. So we can see ones that are coming from workflows, which is hugely valuable and a great change, because previously what you had to do was go into each individual workflow to be able to look at the templates that were set up on, a per status basis. But now we're able to see all of the different types that come from the system. So we have our 5 email templates, but we have also all of the workflows that are contained within the system as well. So that's a really useful way. That's really useful in the system, that we can see everything kind of amalgamated all in one place. And will even take us to the editor as well. So the other feature that I was mentioning is also the email broadcast. And this is where we can do that kind of blast email to a number of different users in the system. So I'm just going to open this copy of the newsletter. And we can see here a couple of the options that are available for the broadcast. So we can also look at the email either in plain text or HTML, depending on the comfort level that you have with doing it in that message format. But we of course have our rich text editor, which allows you to see everything all nice and formatted the way the users would see it. And here are some really really useful features to consider if you're going to use this, which would be the ability to have an unsubscribe link. So if this is a regular notification that you're sending out, of course you want to allow your users to be able to, request to be off of that broadcast list. And also to enable the email tracker, which would include the tracking link. So this is what I mentioned a little bit earlier, where we can not only track the number of people that are opening this particular email, but if we want to include like specific separate links within our newsletter, we can also have the system track how many times the users interacted with this object as well. And if I go over here onto the left-hand side, we have our email metrics as an example. So we can have the click performance, as I mentioned, of our individual separate link. So 2 people opened that link from within the email, or the number of people who just opened that in general, the whole newsletter. And our recipient list as well. This is where we're able to go ahead and add the type of recipients that we want. So we can do the same kind of usual search filters that we can use in other areas of the system. So we can set it up to be conditional search filters that we can use to go ahead and add those individuals, or it might be just a per role basis. So there's a number of different ways that you could do it. It doesn't just have to be a single user type. It can be a mix and match of the specific users depending on whatever search criteria you use to add those users to the list of recipients. So if I go also into my workflows, into one that has an example here. So in our workflow settings in the system, we're able to set up those individual status-based automated communications. So this would be an example of where you know that at a particular point in time in the process, you are going to be sending out a designated email, like for sure. We can, of course, build in like branching logic into the tasks of a workflow so that it's somewhat conditional. You can see here, for example, we have a condition where we're checking for a certain field validation, and if it's not completed, then we wait, we check again. We can do the same thing when it comes to emails. So it could be a case where, depending on this condition, like depending on the type of application that we're looking at, this email template could be used for reviewers versus, type B is going to use this other template option. So if I go into one of these examples, not this one because it doesn't have any emails, of course, because I clicked the wrong one. It's always fun to do webinars and you just like blindly click sometimes on things, and especially when I do charts, sometimes they always add up to 0, which is very sad. But I'm actually just going to go ahead and add a new task so that we can see. So I'm going to go here into new task, and you can see all of the options that we have. I'm going to click acknowledgement. And then here in the message template, I am going to choose our email option. And we can pick again from our email templates that we saw in the communication section. And obviously we have the 4 general ones. Again, we're excluding that one UTA-based one. And we could pick one of those if we wanted. So it could be a declination email template. And then we can set up things like, variables that might be related. So we could attach particular objects. Maybe it's something that's coming from a smart folder, or we can also, reference a particular field from the application. Like, if we want to store their whole application as a PDF, we could attach that in the workflow as well to our emails. And so that every time this application reaches a certain status, if I go back to my tasks, when it reaches review invitation answered status, we're going to send those emails out to whatever users have been defined by the system when we're setting it up. So these are obviously just at a glance some of the options that we have in terms of communicating with users. We can do things on a much more ad hoc basis as well. If I go into my employee giving, let me go into the actual, let's go into corporate giving, into our grants. The other thing that I can do is straight from the UTA here is also use the group email function. So instead of setting up something like a newsletter scenario, we can use some of the same, search filter options for certain records and also do a batch email. So this might be a case where maybe you're noticing reviews that are at a particular point in time in their status. Maybe they're all still in draft. You could go through, filter out the options that are still in draft status here. Let me go back and look all of our types. and maybe you want to contact everybody whose application is in draft and email them a notification that, the deadline is coming up. That's something you could, of course, automate with a workflow, but just as an example, you are able to kind of search and filter through the different records in the system and kind of pick and choose the way you want to contact the users. And it doesn't just have to be the applicant. Depending on the types of contacts that are associated with these records, we can pick and choose there as well. So it's pretty, flexible in the way you're getting a hold of people, whether it's from their profile, through, a blast notification, the workflows, or just, these ad hoc group emails. You can kind of, set up and define the different ways you're going to continue to communicate with your users. But again, these are just a couple examples of the things that we can do. I can see already from my menu here that we've got a bunch of questions that have come in. So I think for now, what I'm going to do is just pause this and go into the question side of things. So if you have any questions, maybe Sarah, you could read them out for us and let us know what people are curious about.
Yeah, sure. That was awesome, Rachel. So our first question, how do you ensure that your emails don't fall into the junk or spam folder?
So that's a good question. Some of it is going to be dependent not only on things from our side of the system, but there are cases where, certain servers on the client end might blacklist certain URLs that an email is coming from. It's kind of an individual scenario. It doesn't happen a lot of the time. We have found some of the automated emails, that come from our demo system and things like that will end up in junk. But you can definitely go through some of the settings, both on your end and troubleshooting with the particular servers of your recipients. I feel like it, actually, I don't want to say which email client it was, but for a while, anything coming from SmartSimple was blacklisted until we resolved things with, that particular server company. But it doesn't happen very often. But if it's something that you've encountered, we can definitely go over it to see whether it's a setting on the SmartSimple side of things, like the way the system is sending things out through the server, or it could be just an issue with a particular, recipient's inbox end of things.
Great. Can you use the broadcast tool to invite a large group of people, so to say, for example, 100, that aren't in your system, but to register on your system and apply for a specific grant?
I don't think I've seen it used to invite people that aren't in the system. Certainly, as I suppose a workaround of what you could do is you could import, say if you did have those 100 email addresses, you could do an auto load into the system of those emails. You could make user profiles, like inactive user profiles, so that they would be available from that search menu when you're creating your notification. And then you could include some kind of an option for them to, finalize their registration details or activate that, contact placeholder that you've used to get the contacts in the system. I can double check for sure. No one's asked me that before. If we can do it with just like brand new users, but I can for sure check and send that around as an after, email.
Great. Would you recommend using broadcasts for newsletters instead of a vendor like MailChimp?
I suppose in the end, that's a little bit up to you, but obviously if you're using SmartSimple for the rest of your business process, as we saw in the system, obviously, by using everything in one place, we're going to be able to make use of the contacts that are already in the system, those lists. We're going to have all of the trackback information set up in the system as well, and be able to template things from within the system, which is really useful. The other thing, the one feature that I didn't point out, which is also on the broadcast, is to save it as an event if you'd like, so that will kind of track things back against users in the system as well that are already registered. So obviously consolidating things in one place, in my opinion, is best, but some of that will kind of depend on maybe the way you're using an external tool like MailChimp.
Great. Rachel, can you review where the group email function icon is for us?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, so I am just in a regular UTA right now, and the group email icon is something, it doesn't show up by default. Maybe it's not something that's enabled for your system, or it's not something that's enabled for maybe your particular user role, because maybe, if you gave, say, for example, your reviewers access to the full UTA instead of just their portal view, you might not want them to have the ability to group email everybody from within the system. So this is where it is on the menu of the list view. And it is something that you would go into like the features and functions setting to turn on, and also permission to be available for certain user types and within certain UTAs.
Can you also just review how you display all emails, including the workflow emails?
Oh, for sure, yes. So that is located, if we go back into the main menu, excuse me, into the main menu, under global settings. So I know we have this communication tab. This is where we're kind of setting up the individual options, but in the global settings, under the communications tab, is where we have the option to see that unified email template area. So the mix of both the individual email templates as well as all of the workflows. So I can click into, this one, and it can give me the name of the workflow that it's contained within. And also, say you had a workflow that had like 20 tasks, it's also giving you the name of the specific task that creates this email in the system. And we can go straight to it as well. So Andy, you can jump straight there.
Great, thanks, Rachel. So it doesn't look like there's any other questions. So thank you everyone for your questions and for attending today. If you do have any further questions after the webinar, please feel free to reach us at businesssolutions@smartsimple.com. We're happy to connect like post-webinar just to go over anything again.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much for attending, and definitely feel free to reach out, because I know that some of these use cases are going to be really specific to the way you guys do things, or you might want some advice on maybe migrating some of those functions, maybe away from a separate broadcast tool into SmartSimple, and we can definitely kind of go over that on a one-to-one basis. That's no problem.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Bye-bye.